To day 2 of the conference. I'm super excited to be back again emceeing you all. We're a slightly smaller room, and we've just still got a few people coming in, so I just thought we'd start our warm-up before we pass over to the panel. So I wonder, just for the first warm-up, if I can get you all to stand up on your feet. So please stand up. And because we're a really long room, I thought we'd do a Mexican wave as number 1 warm-up, okay? So we're going to start the Mexican wave at this end, and we're going to go to this end, okay? So as we do it, we'll do a practice. So we want to make as much noise as you can. So just the warm-up for a start. So you're going to go like that, okay? And we'll go as I run across. You do that, okay? Ready? So. Pretty good. Okay, so now part 2 of it, you're going to start low. So we start down here, okay? And then, woo, okay? And then across, and then down, okay? So ready? 3, 2, 1. Woo. Pretty good. Let's do other way. I'm not going to run this time, otherwise I'll be out of breath. So ready? Start this end. So ready? 3, 2, 1. It's good. Okay, now this time make as much noise as you possibly can. Okay, so start this in. 3, 2, 1, go. That's good. Okay, we're getting there. Now, exercise number 2, I thought we'd do is it's called the horse game. It's my favorite little game to play. We just need 3 volunteers. Who wants to be our volunteer? Oh, excellent. My friend from the Pacific. You've got to come up. Thank you, Ambassador. Someone from somewhere else? Yes, excellent. I think, how about Am? Okay, so what we're going to do is be a horse. Okay? We're going to be horses. So how do we be horses? Yeah, so that's a good start. So when I say ride the horse, we're all going to ride the horse. And here's the couple of ways you can do it. So one is, okay? The second one is the noise. How do we make the noise for ride the horse? Nee! Nee! Okay, so you try. Ready? Go. More! Come on, more! That's good. Ready? So, okay, on the count of 3, we all ride the horse. Ride the horse. Nee! Where's the noise? That's good. Keep going. Ride the horse. This is good. Okay. So now our 3 volunteers, you are the instructors. You guys are riding the horses. You are the riders. You are the horses. Okay? So when you're riding the horse, you're going to yell, you tell us when to ride the horse or stop riding. Okay? So you just say ride the horse. Okay? And you're going to say, you know when you're riding a horse sometimes, not that any of us really ever ride a horse. You're going to say tree. So let's just try it. So, and we'll see what you do. Okay? So if you're riding the horse, so you yell ride the horse, and then Am, you yell tree at any point.
Okay, ride the horse. The noise. 3.
No, tree. Tree, like a tree. So you're riding the horse. You're riding the horse along, and you've come across a tree. So when you come across a tree, you have to duck under the tree. Okay? And then the final one, what's your name? Serena. The final one, Serena is going to yell fence. So if you're riding a horse along, and you come across a fence, you've got to jump and make the noise. You've got to jump the fence. So if you're riding the horse, you go under the tree, and then over the fence. Okay? So as much noise and as high energy as possible, we're going to start down there. So
Fence.
keep riding. So tree, you go down. Ready? Ride the horse. Tree. Ride the horse. Ride the horse. Ride the horse. Tree. Fence. Okay. Okay, we get the picture. So you either ride or you go down or up. You want to try one more? Or is this enough? I think we do one more. I know you want to. This is great. Okay, so we'll start again. And so it's just ride, tree, fence, as many times as you like. Okay, grab a seat. Thank you, my volunteers. So I got us to start doing that because, did you like that? If you ever, when you are at home and you're leading a volunteer event or you're emceeing something or you are speaking at something, you can always just play preschool games, and it works really well. We all like games. Okay, so I got us to do the horse exercise because sometimes leadership is just about getting people to do what they wouldn't otherwise normally do. So some of you might do that at home, but probably not. So to kick us off, I'm just going to invite Sue to come and give some housekeeping information about the river cruise that is tonight. And so big welcome to Sue. Sue is one of the organizers.
Thank you, Sam. I think we're just going to hop down from the horse and then jump onto the boat tonight. So, good morning, everyone. How are you today? I cannot hear it clearly. How are you today? A little bit louder, please. How are you today? I don't think you guys are for Asia Pacific Conference. It has to be louder than that. How are you today, guys? Now we're talking. So guys, my name is SOPHAT, and you can call me Sue. I am from Volunteer Spirit Network team, and today I would like to inform you about the dinner cruise activity that we'll be doing tonight. So for participants who have already bought the ticket, on your name badge, you will have like a sticker just on the little corner. So it means that you have purchased the tickets already. So today we will go to the dinner cruise. Let's meet up at the lobby 5:30 p.m. And we're going to need you to be a little bit, we need you to be punctual. This is because the distance is far and sometimes the traffic can be quite heavy in the evening. And for those of us who haven't purchased the ticket and you would like to join, please come to the register counter and contact me directly during the first coffee break. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy your Day 2 conference.
Okay, so 5:30 in the lobby is the departure time, as Sue said, for tonight. So this morning, we've got a plenary session up first, which I'll pass over to our wonderful facilitator in a moment, who's going to kick that off. And there's going to be there's going to be some good time for question and answer too. So make sure you think as we go through about the questions you can ask. And the final piece of update, which has just escaped me right now, so I won't do it. But make sure 5:30 tonight, and it's completely escaped what the other thing was. So my apologies. Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, oh, that's right. I was going to get you to do the clap stand thing. You forgot about it already. Okay, so when we clap, ready? You stand up. So ready? Clap. Excellent, excellent. That's good, it's good. Okay, that's good. That's much better. Yes, much better. Much better. That's more like a volunteering conference. Okay, so sit down. Okay, so then let's just practice one more time. So a speaker finishes. So I've just finished. Thank you so much. So that's the end of my speech. Excellent, excellent. And the second one, just in case you forgot. So if you agree with something that's being said, you can click your fingers to support the people on stage. They were the two things. Okay, I'm going to hand over to a wonderful man who does a lot for volunteering, both in his personal time. He just told me he actually spent a lot of time in your personal time doing different types of volunteering. Rahim works for VSO and is our wonderful facilitator this morning. So hands together for Rahim.
Thank you, Sam. Simplicity in expression makes the message, resource, or tool understandable, available, and accessible to the most amount of people. During this session, we'll explore a tool that has the ambition to improve the outcomes of volunteering by supporting us to become more impactful and more responsible within our practice. I'm Raheem Hassan Ali. I'm the Volunteering Leadership Manager for VSO. Do you remember the gala dinner, anyone? So I remember Hetaya asking us all to reflect back to our first ever job. My reflection took me back to the year 2000. My reality at that time was I left school without any academic qualifications. I was unable to find employment, and I was left without a home. However, in 2003, I found my first ever volunteering opportunity, and I also received support from a mentor who was also a volunteer. It was volunteering that landed me my first job in the volunteering sector. I have now been working in the volunteering sector for almost 17 years, and I still volunteer in my spare time, as Chris said, to support young people that were in a similar situation or facing the same challenges as I once did. Volunteering completely changed my life. Therefore, I wanted to take the opportunity to thank each and every one of you for being champions of volunteering. Thank you. Over the last 2 years, on behalf of the International Forum for Volunteering and Development and VSO, I have the honor of working with several hundreds of people across the world, from the volunteering sector, from academia, and from governmental and intergovernmental agencies, to develop and produce the first global standard for volunteering for development. Over the next 90 minutes, our esteemed panel will do three things. We'll give you an overview of the global standard. We'll bring to life the global standard through sharing examples of good practice related to the 4 areas that you'll hear about today. We'll also inform you of how you can engage with the global standard as a tool to advance quality in your practice. There we go, so the panel members are up there. So a bit of background. The International Forum for Volunteering and Development, as known as Forum, is a network of 40 member organizations that work through or with volunteers. Forum members highlighted in their annual 2017 members survey that we would like Forum to explore putting together a global set of standards that would draw from existing good practice to guide volunteering involving organizations delivering volunteering activities. As such, the Forum Leading Standards Working Group was assembled, and this was led by VSO. The working group brought together over 40 organizations and networks from the wider volunteering development sector to work on developing a global standard. The aim of the working group was to produce a voluntary standard with the aim of improving outcomes of volunteering for development activities, ensuring organizations that work through and with volunteers are both impactful and responsible in their practice. It was envisaged that the standard, although aimed at the volunteering for development sector, would also be a learning tool for the wider volunteering sector. The global standard is a result of a year-long consultation that took place in 2018 involving several hundred stakeholders, the desk review, the survey, and the workshops. The desk review highlighted 4 key areas that make up vital areas of our work. Areas that are vital to our practice in delivering volunteering for development activities and also volunteering activities. The survey helped us reach a consensus of the definition of volunteering for development. So that's no mean feat, and that's never been done before. We've tried to, when we talked to about 488 people and we asked them, what does volunteering for development mean to you? Not one person talked about it the same. So bringing that together and trying to come up with a definition was a very interesting task. And then we held workshops across the world, and that involved international, national, and also local organizations to establish what should the content be of the standards. So here now is the definition. What is the definition of volunteering for development? The definition, and this is supported by stakeholders who were involved in the consultation, is volunteering for development draws on the skills of volunteers to work alongside people and communities to improve their quality of life and support their own capabilities to help address poverty and equality in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. Volunteering for development activities must always aim to be impactful and responsible. As mentioned, the global standard covers 4 themes that are vital to our practice. These are designing and delivering projects, duty of care, managing volunteers, and measuring impact. Our panel today will highlight the organizational commitment for each of these areas, and we'll bring these areas to life by sharing real-life examples of good practice which you can use in your practice, which you can take away with you today. So our first panel member is SOPHAT SORN, who will be talking about designing and delivering projects. SOPHAT is the founding president and director of Cambodia Youth Action. He is the former vice president for the Network of Voluntary Development in Asia. He has been working within the sector for 15 years, is that right? Yeah. I did a bit of research last night. And he brings together specific expertise in youth and local community development, bridging the world to them. Welcome, SOPHAT.
Thank you very much, Rahim, for the introductions and for being the moderator of this session today. It's an honor to be here sharing with you the knowledge and experience on designing and delivering volunteering programs. I'm going to start with my personal stories, why I landed in the volunteering sectors, and then how I'm stuck here until today. It started in the year 2000 that I actually participated in one of the training course called personal development, where all participants required to take a one-day community service. And since that day, during the days, I get into the remote village and then trying to understand the life. I'm from the village anyway, but then the village that I'm going that day is like more rural and remote for the local people. And there, I feel like I'm into this kind of work. So then I'm continues doing volunteering program throughout the countries for the next 10 years from that day. And in 2010, I joined the first international volunteering programs in Taiwan. That another steps that motivate me to start the volunteering organizations in Cambodia, where Cambodian Youth Actions founded in 2010. After founding the organizations, as a very fresh and motivated participant of the international volunteering programs, I do not really know how the program, volunteering program designed, but because of I'm so inspired, so I start the organization. And from there, I spent like 4 years to travel around Asia and Europe, participate in any international volunteering programs to learn how to design the project, the volunteering project, and how to deliver the projects that helps to create the impact for the local communities, at the same time for the volunteers as well. So from 2014, I start to realize that how can we design the volunteering programs that would help to solve the local communities' problems, at the same time providing opportunities for volunteers, especially young people, because we work a lot with youth, with young people. So then how these volunteers programs impact for themselves as a volunteers as well. So from that day, from 2014, CYA started to host, every year we host about 350 to 500 international and national volunteers in different communities in Cambodia. And we sent also national Cambodian volunteers to participate in different programs abroad as well. And we sent about 70 to 150 Cambodian volunteers overseas each year. I started Cambodian Youth Actions with the belief that volunteering is tools that can help solving the local community issue, and also to help our young people to explore themselves, to understand themselves for their life as well. So like what I am inspired by these volunteering programs as well. So I'm going like to go. So CYA, Cambodian Youth Action in short, we call CYA, and our mission is to inspire, engage, and empower people to take action toward peace and sustainability. That's what we all believe that we can do it. So, there's nothing to do with the scientific research or scholars' research. This is based on the experience that we have been doing for the last 10 years, how we design our projects, how we design our volunteering programs. So then, for designs, we mainly think of 3 aspects that involve communities, volunteers, and partnership. And why these elements is important for us to design our project. So, engage local communities is something that the first and very important for designing any programs. Without them, we just go there and do our job and leave, and then there's nothing there. So we start with engage the local people. Need assessment. I think everyone do the need assessment before you start the project, so there's nothing to explain here. And at the end, we defined what the problems and prioritize the issues, how we're going to tackle with the strategic things. So why volunteers also involved in designing the volunteering programs as well? Because they are the later stage. We just have them and put them in the projects. They are the one who carry on the project. As we are designing volunteering programs, it's different from any other projects that conducted by the expert, but here the volunteers are the one who carry on the program. later on. And because of volunteers, also the connector. From our experience, the local communities and our organizations are always having our volunteers that working together very closely with the local people, and then they connect everyone in the local communities to come together. And volunteers, not just, we most of the time in the early stage of CYA as well, we only think that we are volunteers to help, to solve some problem in the local communities. But in realities, volunteers not just go to help, but they also need to experience, to explore themselves, to learn something back for their future careers as well. I don't say about professional volunteers, but then in general, our volunteers are young people because we're working with youth. So that's why we involved them as well. We thinking about how we are going to put them in the roles of the volunteering program that we organize as well. And partnership. There's many organizations working differently. You base your organizations on fundings and also on different fields, sponsor. But for us, since the beginnings, we work very close with our partners, because partnership is one of our main elements that help us to achieve whatever program we designed. So local partners, we call it local partners, the local communities that we are working with, international partners where the volunteers are sending from the different partners around the world to participate and conduct or carry on the program that we designed. Some programs, there's also donors, sponsors, and funding agencies that support. And we never forget our partners of our government, local authorities, and the local stakeholders that involved in the projects as well. So I think basically for us, we designed our programs focus on this area. And the next part is delivering the program. Because in Cambodian Youth Actions, we have a different type of volunteering programs that we organize. We have short-term program which lasts for 1 month. And then we have middle-term programs that last until 6 months, that volunteers come and stay for 6 months. And we have the long-term program that up to 1 year and more, that volunteers stay in the project size that we are, local projects that we are working with. So this is how we are organizing our programs. So we start by having our volunteers getting to know or adapt to the local community. In CYA, in almost every programs, we have the community challenge, we have the community mapping where volunteers are required to observe the whole communities and get back with some understanding of the context of the local communities, and then we send them to stay. Of course, we always consider the safeties of the volunteers as well. But then we have the community living where the volunteers So the community living where the volunteers experience the real local life of the local people, so that after this period they understand, and then they have friends around, so then they can live and adapt with the local communities. And there, they also have the tasks and activities that they need to perform in order to accomplish their project goals. But at the same time, we also designed our project. Because of the design of the project, we also include the volunteers there. Then we also have the sessions that offer the volunteers to share, to learn from each other, where they share their own knowledge and cultures, so that time to time, one group of volunteers sharing about their country and their cultures, and the next will be the other. So this is how we are helping our volunteers to learn and gain their competence during the work. And finally, everyone throughout the project, especially for middle term and long term, we have the mentoring. And you see why I put these guys with most of the projects that we organize, we have our project coordinators, which always be there with the volunteers and mentoring them throughout the project. So monitoring and evaluations finally there. Then it comes to the impact and impact measurements and later stage that will be our friends gonna share with you the next. So in our organizations, we normally use the 4D models that designs our programs, that we start with the defined it, design it, do it, and developed it. And this is how we are going around the circles and doing our project for this last 10 years. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, SOPHAT. Wonderful presentation. It was great to hear sort of you're not only just thinking about the community, which is really important, but you're looking at the value that volunteers bring, and you're also looking at the importance of partnerships at all levels as well. Sort of the last slide on the 4D diamond, what I realize is like you're constantly redefining the sort of issue and using sort of your learning to re-implement how you sort of deliver your projects and programs, which is really good to hear. Our second panel member is Professor Grace, who will be talking about duty of care. Grace is truly a lifelong advocate of volunteering. She was the former head of volunteering, covering all activities and student engagement across the University of Philippines. She went away for 20 years to do a really important leadership role, but she came back to that same role to further progress and champion volunteering within the university. So yeah, true lifelong advocate. So please welcome Professor Grace.
So, good morning. I guess I'll stay here because I don't have slides anyway. Thank you, Rahim. I've been asked to talk about the duty of care, and as introduced by Rahim earlier, this is a session on volunteering for development. However, I'd like to share with you where I'm coming from, at least for this morning. I will be talking as Director of the Ugnayan ng Pahinungód of the University of the Philippines. I did not prepare slides for this. If you're interested, I invite you to join the session tomorrow in the morning at Salon A, where we will be talking about collaboration and partnerships stronger together. So I'd also like to say that The Ugnayan ng Pahinungód, literally translated, Ugnayan is network, and Pahinungód is a term from one of the several Filipino regional languages that means offering of self. So literally, it's a network of self-offerers. Okay. And this is a university volunteer program. This is the volunteer service program of the University of the Philippines. And as such, we deal with mainly students because this program was launched, okay, as a response to the question, has the university lost its soul? So it is a public service, direct public service delivery program, as well as a values education program. So that changes a bit probably what some of us think about when we talk about volunteering for development. I have had the privilege of working with VSO. Then there was a federation of VSO organizations. And also I have been a longtime member of IAVE, of PAVE, the Philippine Association for Volunteer Effort, VOICE, which is the Volunteer Organizations, Organization, Information, and Coordination Exchange, as well as recently the Philippine Coalition for Volunteerism, which has worked with VSO and Forum, okay, to do this. I was lucky to have facilitated the workshop for the Philippines. Okay, so having shared with you that our program is mainly for students, I also need to be able to say that our programs are both episodic. So we have volunteer programs that are maybe a few hours long or programs that last the weekend. But we also have long-term volunteer programs such as what we call the Gurong Pahinungód program or the Teacher Pahinungód program, where our volunteers who are new graduates of the University of the Philippines are fielded as full-time teachers in what our Department of Education calls the DDUs, the depressed, disadvantaged, and underserved schools. Lately, they've renamed it the Last Mile program. So schools that are very distant from the central office. Okay. With this in mind, keeping in mind that we have long-term volunteer programs, new UP graduates who are sent to these DDUs, and also short-term episodic volunteer programs, maybe what I'd like to share with you are the ways by which we ensure freedom of harm, or more positively, duty of care. Okay. So when we recruit our volunteers, we already have in place our policies with regard to the selection of partner communities and partner institutions. We usually partner with the local government units, and these local government units, it's either the governor or the mayor, partner with us in designing the programs, in telling us which particular areas in the province or in the locality are areas where our volunteers are safe, or where they can guarantee that the volunteers are safe. We also have discussions so that it is clear as to when, okay, we pull out volunteers. Because there are instances when there is a need to release the volunteer from the contract or to transfer the volunteer to another safer place. So what are examples of these situations? Where there is military aggression, for example, or when volunteers do not follow rules. We've shared this before, but in the handbook of Pahinungód, because we have university students, okay, one of the guidelines is that volunteers cannot have exclusive romantic relationships while in the field. And you might think, oh, it's okay to have romantic relations so long as they're not exclusive. No, so no romantic relationships between volunteers or between volunteers and community members while they serve in the field. Why is that? One, it's also the age of our volunteers. Some will be about 18 to about 22. No? So in the Philippines, they're not really adults. Okay. And so when this happens, the downside to that is, as explained to them, very carefully, we hope, is that it takes away from the interaction with the community. Okay, so that's one of the reasons. But really, the main concern would be if something happens in the area where the life of the volunteer or their health might be jeopardized. So just recalling some situations, I remember Rahim said that I'm back to this post. This was my post about 20 years ago when I was 20 years younger and I was going all over the place. I'm not really sure I can do that as well now, but okay, recalling that in the past and the recent volunteer experiences, we've had calls for me or one of the directors, because we're a university system, we have 8 constituent universities, so there's a volunteer director in each of those 8 CUs. So depending where our volunteers are, then we get a call. It's either for me as the system director or one of the directors to go to the place where there is a threat to the safety of the volunteer. So one instance was that, the University of the Philippines is the national university of the Philippines by virtue of a law. Okay? It is also known for its activism. Okay? And in particular, my college, for example, the College of Social Sciences and Philosophy, has as its tagline, the people's conscience. So with that in mind, there are certain stereotypes about students from our university. So I say stereotypes, whether true or not, people do get branded because they are from UP. So we have to keep that in mind when we send volunteers. So we have to send them in areas where they're being from UP. Is not going to adversely affect their acceptance in the community. So at one time, we were called because our volunteers were being interviewed by the police because they were suspected of being rebels. And then I asked, what was the basis for this suspicion? And they said that in the village, our teachers, our volunteer teachers, were using native hand-woven bags, the kind of bags that people would use to go to the marketplace in the city. Okay. That's what they used for their books. Okay. Because to them it was something novel, it was something indigenous, okay, which they valued. And the students would offer to carry their bags. But these students, coming from UP, where no one offers to do anything for their teachers, okay, the teachers refused. And word got around that, these students, these teachers from UP, they're rebels, and they keep their guns in their native bags, and that's the reason they refuse the help of students to carry their bags. Okay? And so we had to go and explain. Because, in our university, teachers carry their own stuff. And students don't see it as a sign of respect to carry or to offer to carry the things of their teachers. And they chose native bags because they have an advocacy for pushing local knowledge and local heritage. And so that was explained. But it was important for us to be able to tell the volunteers prior to their departure that these are incidents that might happen. And when that happens, this is what you have to do. You call the local area person who calls the director of whichever constituent university you're from, and then the system, and the university president. Okay, so there is a policy and a procedure so that in cases where this happens, while they might be funny upon recollection, they're actually very disconcerting, to say the least, when it happens at that time. And it also shows the importance of connections and guarantees from the local government unit. Because without them, then we would not have their support to help us explain why our volunteers act the way they do. So that is important. When we talk about duty of care, of course, it is for the volunteers, but also for everyone who partners with our volunteers. So that would mean the community, that would mean organizations that work with the community. In relation to the Gurong Pahinungód, because they work with the public schools, I think one duty of care here is more psychological. Okay. Our volunteer teachers are rather young compared to public school teachers who likely will have served there for many years. So you're talking maybe about a 20-year-old, 22 to 24, and somebody who's nearing retirement. Okay. And this, in the system, it's that teachers teach the different subjects regardless of their major. And then you have this young Gurong Pahinungód coming in with their areas of expertise. So you have someone who's a major in physics, someone who's a major in art design, someone who's a major in chemistry, biology, math, so forth and so on. Whereas maybe the teachers who have been serving in that DDU school has not had that expertise. So safety for both the community, meaning the school and the teachers, as well as our volunteers, is explaining the role of the volunteer in the school so that teachers are not threatened. So that they know that these are not their possible replacements. Because that's the fear sometimes. Okay? These are, bright students wanting to create change. Are they here because they're after our plantilla items? Are they here after our jobs? We have to tell them that, no, they're here to help. And how do they know how they can help best? You tell them. It's a discussion. So it's asking, how can we help each other out? In what areas can we be of help? So that we also make sure that we do not go to an area where we are not invited. Okay? So that's another thing. The other area to ensure, or in line with the duty of care, is our psychosocial program. We have a psychosocial team in the university that is managed by my office. And what happens is that we create a team usually led by someone from my department, which is the Department of Psychology in UP Diliman. Okay? But we partner with the departments of psychology in the different units, as well as those who are involved in psychosocial work. Like we have social work psychiatrists. We also have medical psychiatrists at our College of Medicine. So all people who are trained in this area. So how does that work? We have assessments prior to deployment, and even before that, we use psychosocial assessments for matching, okay? So that we know that people are ready for their placement. Okay? So for instance, while we say that we don't turn away volunteers, we just match them, okay? We would not place someone to teach for 10 months in a deprived area with the earth as their floor for someone whose assessment form shows that, okay, they're prone to loneliness, okay? Because that's not a good sign for them. It's not going to be safe for them to be in that place for 10 months without signal. You also have to be able to find someone who does not think that it's the end of life when you're not on social media. Okay? So that's a tough call, especially nowadays, because they probably will have access to internet only on the weekends when they can go to the city center, the community center, or things like that. So we make sure that there is psychosocial support. Okay? So that's the pre-deployment. And then we also talk about psychosocial support midway. We have what we call a mid-placement debriefing. So they come together, and then finally also an end-of-term debriefing. So the psychosocial activities are varied depending on the need of our volunteers. Okay? For some, okay, that is also fortunately, there have not been too many, but that's also a possibility, a possible reason for an early exit or a pull-out. You know, when volunteers feel that they're not productive anymore because they're overcome by their sadness. Okay, so that's one of the things also that we can determine because we have a psychosocial team to assess what's happening in that particular situation. Okay. The psychosocial team is also active in terms of helping community members who might be affected by the situation. As I speak, there is probably now a gathering of the volunteers of our psychosocial team. So why I'm here, okay, I have actually been coordinating with our team because you might have heard of very strong earthquakes, a series of earthquakes in Mindanao, south of the Philippines. And so my university has a Mindanao humanitarian effort team going on. We have 4 teams. We have a geological team, a structural engineering team, a medical team, and a psychosocial team. The psychosocial team and the medical teams are part of the organization that I work with. Okay. So one of the latest teams that had to be assembled was the psychosocial team. So we've been texting, messaging on Viber, FB Messenger, and the like, trying to put together a psychosocial team to help those who have been affected by the earthquake in Mindanao. But prior to doing that, we also assure the safety of the psychosocial team because we want to make sure that the psychosocial team is prepared for earthquakes, that they've done earthquake training programs already, because we can't send them there and then they're the ones who get hysterical at the first aftershock. Okay? So that's a training, and then we go on to deploying the volunteers. And I was told just before coming into the room that a team has been formed and that they're working on the training of the volunteers. So in that sense, we are making sure that addressing the health and well-being concern of duty of care to make sure that our volunteers and the community members that we partner with are safe from, or at least there is mitigation of trauma and risks because of these natural disasters. Okay. The duty of care in terms of psychological and physical harm is addressed by both our psychosocial team and our medical team. Okay, so they work together. And in this particular case, the medical team, both teams are going to be deployed at the same time to address the needs of people in 3 different areas where the earthquakes have happened. Okay? So the needs vary. There are different cases. What is important is for the whole organization, we have general provisions, general procedures for making sure that our volunteers, our community partners, our institutional partners are safe from psychological and physical harm. Okay? So that's the most important thing that has to be in place before our volunteers are recruited and deployed. And we also have a formal debriefing session as well as, or in some cases, it's called an exit interview for our volunteers. So maybe lastly, what I'd like to point out would be the monitoring team that we have. Our first speaker mentioned it, but this is something that's very important for us, especially in terms of psychosocial health. So when we have volunteers who are deployed in areas for long periods of time, like 10 months, we make sure that we have experts who visit them while they are in the field. Okay. So they are monitored or supervised, mentored, both on the content area or their expertise, but also, very importantly, in terms of managing their emotional health. Because it's no joke for these young people to be in the field for 10 months away from their comfort zone. So putting all of that together, it's our way of making sure that our volunteers are protected. Some people will have asked us to place volunteers in situations which are high risk. And we have to tell them that we don't send volunteers to high-risk areas. Okay? It will have to be in areas that are where their safety can be assured by people that we partner with. And there are two things that we tell our prospective partners. One, okay, is that we're neutral. So we do not involve ourselves in engagements that are either political or religious, okay? Because that's going to open us to a lot of problems and possibly harm, which is both psychological and physical. So with that, I hope I was able to give you a picture of how the Ugnayan ng Pahinungód works to ensure duty of care for our volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace, for sharing a very comprehensive overview, which actually covered quite a lot of the areas of the duty of care part of the standard. One of the most important areas of the standard. Just to give you a quick insight, the actual duty of care area covers safety and security, safeguarding and protection, but also health and well-being. One of the things that you pointed out, Grace, was who's looking after the people that are looking after our volunteers and communities as well. So that is also very important. The standard itself does not reinvent the wheel. It pulls together good practice like what Grace has shared today and pulls it together in one place. So that's something that's quite special about what we're trying to do here with this tool. Our third panel member is Wendy Osborne, who will be talking about managing volunteers. So a very brief introduction to Wendy while she's coming on the stage. Wendy's the senior consultant of the International Association for Volunteering Effort. She's spent over 30 years of working in the field of volunteer support and development. And actually, Wendy's made a significant contribution. She actually was instrumental in creating the UK's first standard for volunteering involving organisations. And it still stands strong today and is widely recognized by funders and government institutions and all the charities that I've worked for in the past. So welcome, Wendy.
I'm not going to stand behind this, okay, because you won't see me. But thank you. I'm delighted to be here this morning, particularly, of course, because this is the IAVE regional convening in Asia Pacific. And I'm always delighted to come to great friends and colleagues in this region to talk about volunteering. So I'm very privileged to be here this morning. And this is the commitment in relation to the global standards for volunteering and development. volunteers can expect to receive preparation, training and support that ensure effective, impactful and ongoing engagement in supporting development efforts locally and internationally. However, I believe it's good to talk about the things that you know about. And let me see if I can get this right. Yes. So the things that I know about in relation to volunteering best practice and standards in volunteer management come from my experience in the United Kingdom. I live and work in Northern Ireland, which is a part of the UK. And it's important, therefore, to me reflect what we have learned about good practice standards over the last 30 years, and they have really developed. I remember 30 years ago, there was absolutely nothing. And the example I would use, that 30 years ago, I was talking about good practice standards with organizations and volunteer organizers, and it lasted 3 days. 20 years later, it took 9 months. So that is the road that has been traveled in relation to volunteering best practice. But what I have up here are some steps in relation to standards and good management. And the example that I want to choose, because I was asked to use an example, the example I want to choose is very simply, it's about a volunteer befriending project. The organization that I worked for is called Volunteer Now, and it's the website and all is up there on the screen. And it was in 2010, it became a merger of 10 organizations to create it as Volunteer Now. And one of those organizations who merged had been going for over 40 years and has, as part of their work, a volunteer befriending project. And it was a volunteer befriending project for older people in the community. And it's funny because one of the things that the UK has stated over this last while is that one of the biggest health threats to older people and to an aging population is loneliness. And that sense of isolation, which actually can have a massive negative impact on your health and well-being. So this befriending project was going long before that was considered a health risk, but it still has it at its heart, that same thing, where it's older people in the community who it has been designated they could benefit from having a friend. Perhaps they have limited mobility, so they're housebound. Perhaps they have limited networks, limited family around them, and they therefore can benefit from quite simply having a friend who goes in once a week. A very, very simple but very impactful volunteer role. So if we look at what we're talking about in terms of good practice for that type of project, any project that involves volunteers, one of the first things I would say is about the commitment and value. And that is that the organization or the project organizer understands that volunteering is important. It isn't just saying, oh, we'll take a few volunteers and we'll get them to do this. There's actually a value placed on the volunteer role. So you're understanding that this befriending role, it's best done by a volunteer because a volunteer wants to do it, is giving their time, has empathy with the individual that they're going to be befriending. So commitment and value is the very first thing. Whenever I was training, I used to say to people, if you had all the money in the world, would you still involve volunteers? Now, there's a right answer to that, and there's a wrong answer to that. Because volunteering comes, and we've had quotes about it, it comes without price. It is valuable in its own right. And then the second thing is about resources. So does the project, does the organization have the appropriate resources in order to be able to involve the volunteer effectively, so that the volunteer is getting something from it, as well as the beneficiary, the community, the individual. So it's important that you have the right resources. It's not necessarily all about money, but it is about having perhaps the staff support or the volunteer leader support or the support in place to be able to assist the volunteer appropriately. And the third thing is about diversity. I live in a world where often volunteers are recruited because somebody taps you on the shoulder. I need a volunteer, you will do. In terms of project work, it's very important that you actually have a diversity of people. And in terms of this befriending project, it's very important that it's not all young, old, perhaps visiting an older person, that we have young people involved in that program as well, so that there's that intergenerational aspect, That actually some of the the men who want to be befriended, simply want another man to come and talk to about sport or about something in their lives. So it's important that the program has diversity of volunteers involved. And that's really important to all volunteer programs. We had something else we were taught, don't recruit everyone as a volunteer that looks like you. It's not that there's anything wrong with you, it's just that it's really important that we have a diversity of people as volunteers in all our projects. And then it comes to the role. Have you clearly defined the role? Do you completely understand what you're asking the volunteer to do? Do you completely understand what the expectations are? Indeed, what the expectations are of the volunteer who you might recruit. But having a properly defined role is so important in terms of volunteer management. And then there is the protection issue, the safeguarding issue that Grace has alluded to. Have you thought through the things that might happen to the volunteer or that the volunteer might come across? In this particular volunteer befriending role, volunteers are going into a person's home. So there, first of all, is a sense of responsibility for that. They're often meeting and dealing with people who are vulnerable. So there's a responsibility and protection for that. Protection for the volunteer and protection for the older vulnerable person. In the UK, we have a legal framework for the protection of children and vulnerable adults. So the volunteers must all work within that legal framework so that there is protection for the client, if you like, for the individual, but also there is protection for the volunteer. And often how that happens is that often the older people might be suffering from dementia or have Alzheimer's, and therefore they can get confused. So the volunteer has to understand that that confusion doesn't mean that they might be accused of something which they haven't done, but it's part and parcel of perhaps that old person's particular situation. So how do you deal with that? Also, older people will tell volunteers things that they won't tell anyone else. So the volunteer has to understand for their own protection, how do I deal with that when that older person tells me something? Particularly something that might be about that older person's safeguarding or about their personal circumstances. What do I do about that? And that goes back to the whole area of resources. Does that volunteer in this particular instance have the support? Do they know where to go to in order to get the support to help them be more effective in their role and to feel confident and competent about what they're actually doing? So that goes back to having the appropriate resources. Now, all of that, commitment and value, resources, diversity, thinking about role, and thinking about protection, are the preparedness. That's what you have to do before, I would say, you go live to recruit a volunteer. And unless you have done all of that, actually, you're not being effective in your management of volunteers. So thinking about the involvement of volunteers, having everything in place that you need and that the volunteer is going to need is so very important. So then you go to what we call as fair recruitment. And this goes back to this thing about diversity, that everyone can volunteer. Everyone should have the opportunity to volunteer. I strongly believe that. Everyone should have the opportunity to volunteer. But not every volunteer is right for every volunteer role. So it's important for the volunteer that you have the right volunteer, so it's good for them, and the right volunteer allows the volunteer involvement to be more effective. So when you're recruiting for something like a befriending role, first of all, people have to understand very important things, that this is about going into someone's home and that it's a one-to-one situation. And some individuals don't really like one-to-one situations. They much prefer working in a team of volunteers. So clear when you actually do the fair recruitment and you're going through recruitment processes that people understand what the expectations are. The second thing is that this is a longer-term commitment. It's not a week, it's not a month. Normally, they're asked to give a commitment of volunteering to a year because this is about building up relationships. And it's not about going into a home and then leaving it a month later. So the recruitment process and setting out the expectations and recruiting the right volunteer for this particular befriending role is very, very important. So that's why if you're prepared, it makes the recruitment a lot easier. Often organizations have come to me over the year and said, oh, the volunteer is not right for this role. And the first thing I ask is, what did you do? What did you do before you recruited the volunteer? And often they have not thought through the steps of what it means to recruit the volunteer for that particular role. So preparedness, be prepared is really important. And then there is induction. Again, particularly for this befriending role, volunteers need to understand a little about the legal framework. They need to understand the do's and don'ts. That goes again back to the protection of them and protection of the individual. They need to feel confident in what they're doing. So induction and also training that goes part of induction is really very important to that. The volunteering, having the right training and the right information to do the role effectively, gives them a sense of well-being. It adds value to what they're doing, and it also creates a more effective relationship in relation to this particular befriending role. So induction is important. Support and supervision. And I think this is very important because volunteers have expectations. This particular befriending role, not only does it have an individual, it has an individual, sometimes families, who have expectations of what the befriending role will provide. It's often the befriending is a request from social services or from a government organization, so they have expectations. So a whole set of stakeholders here that have expectations, and the volunteer is usually at the center of that. So support and supervision is really vitally important, and providing the volunteer with support for them as well personally. So, as we recruit younger people to take on the role, often they have expectations of after they finish the role, what they will gain in perhaps going on to further education or into a job or whatever it is. So it's managing those expectations through support and supervision, which are actually really important. And helping the volunteer when their volunteer role has come to an end. You know, that closure of that, how does that work? And support and supervision can help with that too. And then recognition. I was at something yesterday, I think, I don't know if Judy's in the room, but Judy Esmond from Australia, who had 3 words up: appreciation, appreciation, appreciation. And recognition is so important. And recognition, particularly I think in this befriending role, to an individual who's going in on a one-to-one basis with someone for quite a long time, is getting a lot out of it, but needs that kind of support. So the volunteer befrienders come together on a regular basis to talk about their particular role, to identify training that perhaps or information that they would get a benefit from. And that is all about giving the volunteer recognition, as well as being, thanking them, appreciating them for what they're actually doing. And often, because it can be quite isolating, but this volunteer befriending project has been going for 40 years. And in those 40 years, I know 2 volunteers who have given over 20 years to the same individual. One was a woman who started whenever she was in her mid-30s. And as a volunteer and as the person that she was befriending, they actually grew old together in that relationship. The other one was a gentleman who befriended someone in a mental institution in a very, very difficult situation who had nobody. And he went faithfully every week for over 20 years until that person actually sadly died. So this is about sometimes a very big personal commitment. And it's important that we recognize and appreciate that, because those are the kind of things that actually out in the community help those people who are most vulnerable. A volunteer can really be a lifeline for those individuals. So recognition of that is really important. Now you'll be delighted. I mean, I think, at home, the people in volunteer now would be delighted. I have encompassed volunteer management on one slide. I did that because I know now we don't use paper, we take photographs. So you can all take a photograph of that one slide. What you have on it is the tenets of what good practice is. Now don't forget, I could stand up here for 9 months and talk about all of that, but I'm only standing up here for 10 minutes. But what you have is, first of all, you have the IAVE website. If you're interested in IAVE from this conference and you're not already a member, I'll just give it a little plug. Go on the website and think about being a member or a global friend of volunteering. The second thing is Volunteer Now, the organization that I had the privilege of leading for over 30 years. And its website is up there. And its logo is Connect, Build, Change. Connect together with your community. Build the kind of relationships that actually create positive change wherever you are. And I would also say that on their website, they have a ton of information. If you go to volunteer management and if you go to publications, you will find a series of toolkits. I'm telling you that because the toolkits are really good. I may be biased, but they are good. And the second thing is the name of the toolkit. The name of the toolkit is As Good as They Give. And that goes back to the very first point about commitment and value. The volunteer is your resource, such a very important resource. You know, we talk about renewable energy a lot in the world. Well, I think volunteering is one of the key renewable energies because you can get volunteers in each generation. So that As Good as They Give, it's really important to value the volunteer. And then the third thing up there is the Investing in Volunteers standard. And those things that I've talked through are the 9 indicators of the Investing in Volunteers standard. It's a UK recognized standard for organizations. It's tough because we say volunteering, you know, to do good volunteer management, it is tough. It usually takes an organization about a year from a development plan to get the standard. There are 9 indicators and 46 measures of impact or of good practice that is looked at. But looking at the standard and drawing down the standard to look at what it looks like is free. So go on the Investing in Volunteers website and draw down that as well. So there you have one slide. Wow, I've outmatched myself today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wendy. It's not just all about goodwill. It's you know, the relationships that volunteers build with people and communities, which is the unique contribution. We must adequately resource and have the right processes in place to really support and recognize that contribution. So very important. Lastly, I want to make sure there's enough time for Q&A, so we're going to invite Nalitra up to the stage to talk about measuring impact. Nalitra, PhD, is the Evaluation and Research Specialist for VSO. Nalitra was the former Assistant Professor of Economics at the Faculty of Economics in Chiang Mai University. Nalitra earned her doctoral and master's degree in International Development Economics from Nagoya University, Japan, and has a bachelor's degree in International Relations from the, I might say this wrong, it's Chulalongkorn University in Thailand. She's also published many research papers and won the Golden Elephant Award for the best young researcher in social science from the Chiang Mai University in 2014. So please welcome Nalitra.